Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lysha from Lysha Be Creative, and today I'm back with another Tumbler tutorial, and with Father's Day coming up, I'm going to show you how to create the perfect Father's Day tumbler using inks. So of course everything used in today's tutorial will be listed and linked down in the description box down below. Be sure to check that description box out, of course, for discount codes and lots of the products that I use and keep in my very own craft room. So before you go, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And that's about it. So let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. So first things first, we are starting off with a 20-ounce skinny straight from Hog Tumbler. So I am just going to prep my tumbler just like I normally would. Remove this little like stainless steel piece that's always on the bottom of these cups. So this is a straight-sided cup, my favorite cup style to use, but I do promise to be bringing some more curved tumblers or modern curved styles to the channel, because I know I typically do gravitate towards these because they're really easy to apply vinyl and other things to, but I will be introducing some other styles as well for those of you who may not care for the straight-sided tumblers. So just gonna go ahead and get that scuffed up and clean this off with a little bit of 91% rubbing alcohol, and then we're gonna go ahead and head outside to spray paint this. So of course I'm just going to use a primer paint. A flat white spray paint will do as well. Just get a nice layer of paint here all along this cup, making sure it's nice and even, because we are going to take this cup and then turn it into a wood grain tumbler. So I want to make sure that my cup is fully covered in that spray paint, that there aren't any stainless steel sections of the cup exposed. That way we can make sure that we get a really beautiful look when we get this wood grain alcohol ink applied. Back inside, after the cup has dried, I am using espresso. This is a Ranger alcohol ink. I typically will use sepia or teakwood. However, I have actually been out of my brown alcohol inks. So I ended up using espresso, which is a little bit more of a darker wood grain look. I usually gravitate towards sepia or teakwood, or a combination of the two, because I get kind of a richer, more red look to my wood grain, if that makes a little bit of sense. So I'm just taking my espresso alcohol ink and a dry chip brush. As you can tell, this is my designated wood grain brush, just a brush that I picked up from the Dollar Tree. And we're just doing those up and down motions, right? So you don't want to go side to side or left to right, anything like that, because that will not give you the wood grain look. That is going to give you kind of like a brush stroked look, but it won't really look like the natural wood grain, you know, that you'd find in any wood piece. So I'm just going to continue to do those up and down brush stroke motions with my dry chip brush, just making sure that I get everything covered. You'll see that I will go back and forth too as well in some of the sections where I didn't have enough ink, and apply a little bit more alcohol ink. That way I can get the entire cup covered. And then of course, don't forget your bottom. So for your bottom, obviously it's a little bit hard to do those, you know, up and down brush strokes. So I was just going like a circular motion and just with the inks, and then just kind of brush in one direction. That way I get kind of the same look that the rest of the cup looks like. So once I'm satisfied with my wood grain look, I'm going to go ahead and let this sit. So you guys know that I don't like to seal my alcohol inks. I never do. Anytime I have had an issue with like them changing colors. So what I end up doing is just leave it to dry overnight. I want to make sure that this alcohol ink is fully dry, and then I'm going to put it on the turner for a coat of epoxy, and then just kind of get that sealed in. So now we are on the turner at this point, and this is only the second coat of epoxy. So I am using Flynn Sisters Artist Cure epoxy. I'm not using the fast set for this because I will be dropping inks directly into the epoxy, and I want to make sure that I don't end up with the epoxy curing before I'm done playing with all of my inks, okay? So I always gravitate towards and would suggest that you use a regular cure epoxy versus a fast set, because you won't have enough time to really mess around with the inks as you're dropping them into your epoxy. So I'm just doing a nice layer of epoxy on the cup, just enough to really be able to glide along the cup, probably about 15 mLs or so, I would say, for this cup with the Artist Cure. Gonna make sure that that is thoroughly covered on the cup, and then I will go ahead and give this a quick torch. So torching this just to get any bubbles that might be present. I'll let it spin for a little bit of time. I am going to be using and utilizing the little bit of epoxy I have left with some of the colorants, but I'm going to let this spin after I've torched it just to give it a couple minutes for the epoxy to kind of settle and really swirl around there, and then we'll be able to come back in with the colorants. So I'm going to be using 2 blue inks from Jen's Crafted Gems. I'll be using Dead Sea as well as Phone Home. Both of these were in her primary pack, which she does still have available on her website, jenscraftedgems.com. So be sure to check that out. If you're on the hunt for a great set of alcohol inks, I definitely recommend Jen's inks. I have never been disappointed. I love her inks, and I have almost every pack. I still have a couple more that I need to grab, but I have every other pack that she has launched, and I love every single ink that comes in those packs. So I started there with Phone Home. That is the darker of the 2 blues we're using today. And I just went through, just like I would typically if I'm doing an alcohol ink swirl cup, right? As I've just gone to the bottom portion of this and really just added a bunch of drops there. I'm trying to cover up most of the wood grain on the bottom portion of this cup. I'm okay if a little bit peeks through, but obviously the goal here is to have most of that covered up. I'm going to go back in with Dead Sea and just fill up any empty spaces and add some Dead Sea alone by itself towards the top of the Phone Home to be able to give that kind of transition from darker to lighter blue. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of the epoxy that I had left in that cup, and I'm going to add a couple drops of Lucid, and then I'm going to add a drop or 2 of just some white epoxy dye. This is from Alumilite. Depending on how much epoxy you have left, you definitely don't need any more than like 1 drop of the epoxy dye. It really does make it super pigmented. So if you're looking for that sort of ultra white and bright, definitely epoxy dye is the way to go. I didn't want it to be super, super opaque, so I did want there to be a little bit of translucency, which is why I did also add Lucid as well. So now I'm just taking my stir stick and I am literally just like swirling this on. So there are numbers of ways that you could do this. You could have dropped Lucid directly in there and kind of played with the inks that way. I find that I have the best swirl look when I do it with adding the colorants into epoxy and just kind of drizzling them over top. That's when I feel like I get the best sort of swirl look, a lot of movement and things, because that additional epoxy, right, is adding to making the colors kind of swirl together versus the ink and just whatever epoxy is already on there. So then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of heat with my heat gun just to get some of my colorants moving and get that epoxy that it's already on the cup sort of, moving and swirling. That way it can start to blend the colors. The goal here is that I'm not going to be able to see a whole lot of the white, which was certainly super apparent when I first took that off of the turner there. I really want all of that white to brighten up both Phone Home and Dead Sea, and that's the purpose of introducing that colored epoxy into the cup here. So take it off the turner, and this is where you just get to play with how your swirl is sort of coming together. Playing with inks is one of those things where you just continue to add heat, move your tumbler up, upward and downward, add more colorants until you feel you are satisfied. I do always suggest that if you're just getting into using alcohol inks and trying to do swirls, focus on just using a couple of colors. Don't try and go super crazy with all your colors, because sometimes you end up with a bit of like a brown, black, muddled mess if you're not quite sure how to utilize them. Get familiar with your inks. I definitely would stick to like 2 or 3 colors and try and get those really beautifully swirled together. Maybe try out something like this technique where you're just using 3 colors and really just kind of see how you like how the swirl effect comes together. And obviously with practice and with patience in a style like this, that definitely ends up with a beautiful result in the end. So I'm just going to continue to add a combination of just adding a little bit of heat, taking it off the turner, and again kind of letting the inks move to the bottom of the cup and then back towards the top of the cup, and then putting it back on the turner to again let it swirl. The other thing you'll notice, and I'm going to hop into a clip in a second, is with this kind of technique, because I'm not doing the entire cup and I'm not going for an entire, swirl all over the cup, like from top to bottom, I do sort of babysit this a little bit. So I babysit this for at least 20 to 30 minutes when my cup has the epoxy is just starting to kind of stiffen up, if you will, and I will continue to switch directions of how my cup is turning so that I don't get too much swirl action happening in one direction or the other. So that's really helpful if you are concerned that it's going to change the kind of look of the overall design. So I let that sit overnight until cured, and then we're back with our decal. So I got this decal from Creative Fabrica, so I'm just showing you that literally all I did with this file after I downloaded it was I grabbed it, put it in Cricut Design Space, and then did an offset. I did an offset of about 0.55 with, of course, rounded edges since this is a rounded design. I then cut the original design on white and then did a blue for the offset. What you're seeing me do here in the larger view of the screen is I'm just reverse weeding this decal because this has a lot of small, intricate, wording and letters and things. I really wanted to make sure that I didn't accidentally lose a letter in my transferring. So I do find that reverse weeding is really helpful. Some people like to reverse weed directly on their Cricut mat. Mine are never sticky enough to be able to do that. So I end up just, sort of taping my transfer tape to the table to be able to sort of reverse weed this. So now we're going to go ahead and get this layered onto the cup. So the cup's off the turner. Again, we're only at 2 layers of epoxy right now. So the bottom half of your cup you may notice is a little bit wavy feeling. Don't worry about that. That's completely normal. That will fix itself once you go to add your final coats of epoxy. Then the whole cup will be completely smooth. So it's okay if you feel that waviness where the inks are. That makes a lot of sense because of course we have a little bit more epoxy down there that kind of had to swirl and twirl and do all that fun stuff down at the bottom, which is why it's a little bit sort of wavy compared to the other portion of the cup. So I'm now going to apply my decal. Sometimes I like to layer these, but I have noticed recently that I get better results and less bubbles if I apply the layers one at a time versus layering them first and then putting the layered design on top of the cup. So that's what I've been doing as of recently. It just seems to work the best for me. So I'm going to, of course, put the offset down first. Go ahead and get this onto the cup. Just eyeball it to the best that I can. Then I'm going to go ahead and using the hinge method, just get this applied to the cup. I'll remove the transfer tape off of this, and then we're going to go into adding the original decal, sort of the top layer of this decal. So this is a really great, simple, easy cup, I would say, to each their own, for a dad, for someone in your life who's a great father figure, a great male role model. This is going to be for my dad. Thankfully, I don't think my dad watches my YouTube video that often. So, and Mom, don't tell him that I'm making him this cup because it's supposed to be a surprise. So this is for my dad. And so I just thought that this was a really nice design because it doesn't have glitter, it doesn't have sparkle, it still is very much a manly cup, if you will, right, without having to add all of that sparkle. Sometimes I forget that cups can really be beautiful and really can be pretty even when you don't add any glitter. Inks are a great way to get a really beautiful and unique looking cup without having to gravitate towards glitter or some really intricate design, right? So the last thing I'm doing here is I'm just going back through that top layer of my decal and just removing any of like the pieces that needed to be weeded out and some of the letters. I saved that to last because it was too small for me to do when I was reverse weeding. Sometimes it's just easier to do it right on the cup. So after this is done, this cup, of course, will get its 2 final coats of epoxy. You guys are watching it right now and it has not yet gotten its final coat since I have a little bit of time before Father's Day, but I'm already in love with how this came out. I think this is such a beautiful and unique design. Definitely let me know what you guys think of this in the comments, and you guys know that, of course, I will be back yet again next week for another set of tutorials. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye!